Now, a lot of these kind of killings have been happening in recent days. There's a spate of these killings. For example, 33 people were said to have been killed in Goa West and Upper in Benue State. This happened earlier this month, before the recent one in Yawata. And 72 people were said to have been killed in Logo local government area, precisely in Urukum. In April, 72 people being killed in Bagir in Ukum local government area. In Otukpo, it's also happened. About 11 people were said to have been killed. At some point, we heard that the chief of army staff was said to have deployed, or he said that he's going to stay there, hold the ground, and ensure that this kind of attack did not happen again. The NSA was also on the entourage of the president in that visitation. Don't forget some of the words that the detective used. He said land grabbing, full scale, terrorism, genocidal attacks, and a whole lot of words that he used. But tonight, let's put perspectives into all of this and let's get someone who is in the know. His key expertise is on issue of extremism, extreme terror, and insecurity issues. Those are the things that this man has expertise. He's Mr. Bulama Bukati, who is joining us from London. He has a dual qualification as a lawyer in Nigeria and in England and Wales. He's a senior analyst on conflict and development in sub-Saharan Africa. He's written so widely on the issue of extremism on the region. Thank you so much, Mr. Bukati, for joining us tonight. You know, when I invite you, it's at the stage where we need to put some perspectives and break things down. First and foremost, the information that you have, the Tortif said this is terrorism. And I do know that terror or terrorists do have their own appellation. They have their origin. They have their sect. They have their group. They have their leanings. They have their linkages. Who are these terrorists? Because we do know how many terrorist groups that we have in Nigeria. Are these new form of terrorists or what? What do we know? Are these new form of terrorists or what? What do we know?
Look, Shaun, what we are witnessing in Benue State today goes beyond the traditional. What we are witnessing in Benue State today had a cry for communal clashes. This goes far beyond that, and I think what we are witnessing in Benue today is terrorism. It works like terrorism, it talks like terrorism, and it kills like terrorism, and therefore it is terrorism. Look at the frequency of the attacks, look at the scale of the attack, look at the sophistication of the attack, and look at the coordination. From May, April, June, over the past 3 months, reports suggest that at least 400 people have been killed in Benue State. That's not farmer-herder crisis. That's not communal clashes. And look at the GPL level coordination of the attackers and how they raid and raise whole villages and how they target civilian infrastructure. They destroy markets, they destroy schools, they destroy anything they see on their way. And so when you look at the nature of the attacks, when you look at the frequency of the attacks, when you look at the sophistication of the attacks, and when you look at the number of fatalities, you will be left with no other conclusion than to say this is not farmer-herder crisis, it is not communal clashes, it has become terrorism in the real sense of the word. And I think it is high time that the federal government has declared the situation in Benue and other parts of north-central Nigeria as terrorism and treat it as such. And that means deploying specialized security forces, more intelligence capacity, and more plans to protect civilians. This situation is getting out of hand, and the longer it lasts, the more difficult it will become to reverse. As to your question, who are the actors? One of the shames in this crisis in Benue State is that we are still unable to define with precision and certainty who the attackers are. Some people will say armed bandits or armed herders. Others will say there are local criminal groups involved, while some victims interviewed by media say they see people with foreign sounding languages attacking them. And I think it is a shame that the Nigerian security and intelligence intelligence forces still have not defined the actors. They have not hunted them down, because if you don't even know who they are, then it is impossible for you to tackle them or to arrest them or to engage them in terms of military confrontation. And it is also a shame that even our researchers have been unable to pin down who the attackers or the actors are. And until and unless we define this crisis properly as the terrorism that it is, and until and unless Nigerian security and intelligence forces have invested enough resources to pin down who the actors are and where are they operating from, then we are not going to get a handle of the situation. And I think that's what we should do right now. It is time for the federal government to declare this situation as terrorism and declare operations in Benue and neighboring states as an anti-terrorism operation, deploy more security and intelligence capacity. And I think just leaving the police or asking the police, as the president did, to arrest offenders is not enough. We know the capacity of the Nigeria police force, and we know how lethal these attackers are, and we know that the Nigerian police force does not have the capacity to hunt them down, to engage them militarily, or to even arrest and investigate them. And therefore, we need a specialized force to do that.
So let me go back a step. So we do know, and you have a very strong understanding of some of the nature of, and you can dissect, which you have done a few times, the DNA based on the tendencies, based on the attitude, based on the language, based on the modus operandi, the attack pattern of a particular group, and you have been able to place your finger. For example, I know we have the ISIS West Africa, we have the ISWAP, we have the Ansaru, the Boko Haram wing. We have the different classes and groups of the terrorist group in Nigeria. If you look at all of the forms and the patterns of all these groups, who do these, in terms of their modus operandi, who do they look more like? These guys who have operated in Benue State in the last 2 or 3 months, the pattern of attack, who do they look like? Let us diagnose, let us identify what they could look like.
Yeah, so the first thing to say, Sean, is that they look like terrorists, and therefore they are a terrorist group, whoever they may be. But a few years ago, when I was at the Tony Blair Institute, I did write an article on the situation in north central Nigeria. And at the time, some of the evidence I was able to gather revealed that there was a Boko Haram faction that was making incursion into north central Nigeria. And it is the Al-Qaeda affiliated faction of Boko Haram called Ansaru. At the time, the federal government, including the presidency, denied my report, but they later admitted, and we later saw the Niger State governor, Nasarawa State government complaining about Boko Haram factions, incursion or other violent extremist groups claiming to fight in the name of Islam. Now, at the time, part of my reporting, part of my article discusses how Ansaru was strategically planning to attack Christian communities in particular, and refused to claim the attacks in order to stir ethno-religious crisis in Nigeria. Their plan is to attack and then never claim the attack, and people will then start pointing fingers at each other, and then their hope is that there would be ethno-religious crisis in the country. I am not saying this is what is happening right now, because like I said, this article was written, I think maybe about 5 years ago, and I have not continued to follow or monitor the situation as closely as I would have wanted to, especially in north central Nigeria since then. So I don't know whether any of the Boko Haram factions or another violent extremist group has a hand in this. And if they did, then it could be that, but if they did, then it could be that they are refusing to claim attacks because, number one, they want it to be claimed as communal clashes, and therefore one community will attack another and one community will hate, and division will continue against all communities in Benue and north central Nigeria. And also maybe they would refuse to claim attack because they don't want to attract the attention of the security forces. And so they want to continue to operate below the radar. And the way to do that is to attack, then run back to your enclaves and never claim the attack, and so no one would know who is the actual attacker is. Oh. And so what I am saying is that it is possible that one of the terrorist organizations, and remember, Sheun, that these terrorist groups now, it is established that they have cells in Kogi State, in Nasarawa State, in Niger State. I don't know how close or far this particular community or communities that are being attacked in Benue, I don't know how close they are to these states and whether it is possible to use motorcycles to travel from camps to commit these attacks and come back. But remember that both Ansaru and ISWAP have a clearly defined public policy of targeting Christian communities. And Ansaru in particular says it wants to target the Nigerian government and Christian communities, even though they kill Muslims. That is what their policy says, and I think they should be candidates that should be investigated to see if they have a hand in this. But like I said, I don't know for sure, and I am not making any policy, certain policy prescription here. These are possibilities that our security and intelligence forces must investigate.
So let's look at it carefully again for what we know. The activities of this terror cell that is operating, because it has been established by the state that these are this is a terror group terrorizing that region. Now, if you look at what has been happening in the north-central region of the country, the victims in northwest region of the country will tell you that, especially in part of north-central like Plateau, they will tell you that some of these people come into their community, chase the community people out, hold on to the land, stay in the land. Part of what the Tortiva said, if we were to diagnose what is happening, it talked about land grabbing. It talks about genocide, which is similar to what is happening in Plateau, where it looks to the natives, the natives and the community people, that there is like an intentional act to wipe away a group of people. That is what it looked like. But if you look at historically, there has been these tendencies happening in Nigeria where it does look like an ethnic group, a group of people have been intentionally almost wiped out, and because of the minerals or the resources in the land, they're coming for it. And those are some of the narratives you hear from the natives. So if you look at that pattern of what is happening in the Northwest, is it what is distilling into the North Center, especially in Benue? Don't forget also that Benue State has a historic issues of farmer-elder clashes. Tortif said this is not in that area. This is genocidal. This is full-scale, full-on terrorism. This is land grabbing.
Look, I mean, I don't know about the use of the word genocide, because genocide is a specific concept clearly defined under international law, and it requires the evidence to prove genocide. But I think what we can say for sure is that this has become terrorism, and I think there may be some territorial interest in that. But then the problem shown is that these people who are attacking by all accounts, it's not like they attack villages, they raise the villages, and then they occupy the villages in terms of, making the villages their homes or taking over the farms in order to start farming. Because if it is land grabbing, they should be taking the villages, and now we should be seeing them occupying the villages. But these are people who attack and then retreat into their enclaves wherever they are coming from. And therefore, I think it's a classical case of terrorism in terms of its modus operandi, that's the mode of operation, but also in terms of the people that are being targeted. And if you have territorial motivation, land grabbing as part of that motivation or that of equation, then it becomes classic terrorism. But then what is failing these narratives? What is failing these narratives is the failure of governments and security agencies to investigate, pin down, identify, and publicly define the actors and go after them. And where there is this information void from government, where there is information void from research organizations that are on the ground, then in the end you will get different narratives. Unfortunately, if you get the narrative wrong, if you define the problem wrongly, then you are going to apply the wrong prescription, the wrong medication, and therefore that is only going to make the situation worse. So, like I said, I am not sure this is genocide. I mean, we can go and come back, but I don't want us to get lost in definition. The most important thing is that human lives in multiples are being lost in Benue State. Human livelihood are destroyed. Farms, homes, markets, schools, and other places of civilian infrastructure are being destroyed, and that cannot be allowed to continue. This is a stain on our national conscience. It is more than tragic or horrific. It is terrorism that the federal government has to define as such and treat as such. And what I hope the federal government will do in the coming weeks is to declare this situation as terrorism and deploy special terrorism forces to go and hunt down whoever is responsible for these heinous crimes and bring them to justice.
Now, so there's something that should interest everyone, and I'll take you through a bit of geography. So this area, they're being affected in Benue State. Yawata, for example, is in Guma local government. Guma local government borders Doma local government of Nasarawa State, and there is also Kena local government on the northern, on the northwestern side of Benue State, and also on this side you have the Awe local government area, and on the extreme side you have Taraba State, and Benue is sandwiched like that. And you have local governments like Guma, Logo, Ukum, and Katsina Ala. These are the local governments that are most hit recently by some of these attacks. So the big question here is that those in the communities are saying that some of these guys attack and run into these communities. And look at what the president said. The president is asking for reconciliation. There are those who are saying reconciliation with who? Is it an ethnic clash? Are they fighting? The president has said, set up a committee of former governors and leaders to come together for reconciliation. The president has security report. Is that something that we do not know? If the president is setting up a committee for reconciliation, it means something, isn't it?
Yeah, it does. And it's not just the president. You also saw the chief of army staff recently talking about how it is farmer had a crisis and how it is impossible for them as the Nigerian military to tackle that. The narrative of farmer had a crisis has been the traditional conventional wisdom in that part of the world. And there were times when there was farmer had a clashes. And it is not just North Central. Even in the Northwest today, even in places like Jigawa State, Kano State, some villages in Kano, even in my state, Yobe State, there are areas where you will see traditional farmer-herder clashes, where you will see herders encroaching into land that is designated as farm and is being cultivated as farms. And then now the farm owners respond, and in the process, they clash and one or two people get killed on both sides. But this is not what we are seeing in Benue State today. Shaun, over the past 2 years, when you look at ECLED data, armed conflict and location monitor data, which is the most reliable data when it comes to conflicts across the world, their data shows that around 1,080 people were killed in Benue over the past 2 years, since 29th of May 2023. That's since when President Tinubu took over power, 1,086 people or so. Now, but then over the past 3 months, over 400 people have been killed. This tells you that over the past 3 months, almost the equal number of people that were killed in the first year of President Tinubu's administration have been killed in just Benue State. That's horrific. And then we talk about farmer-herder clashes. Now that we have 150 people killed amongst the villages we are talking about, then we also need to see the figures on the other side for you to say it's a clash. And so I think the president's call may have some place when it comes to addressing the farmer-herder elements of the violence we see in North Central Nigeria, and that is still going on. But it is not the one that is taking the number of lives we are talking about in Benue State. This is well coordinated. This is very lethal. this is a campaign that looks like terrorism, and therefore we have to treat it as one. And therefore, what I think the federal government should do, our military and intelligence agencies should do, is to treat this specific issue as an anti-terror operation, while the committee the president was talking about can work on community relations. Because, yeah, there is farmer harder crisis traditionally, or there was. Maybe there is still some remnants of that. And we know that community relations in north central Nigeria, in many parts, is still not very good. Right. And therefore, there is a place for a reconciliation committee, but we cannot say the reconciliation committee can work or be effective on this terrorist group or terrorist cell that is killing people. And we should not give terrorist organizations recognition or the recognition to be negotiating with government. No, we have to use heavy military force on them and make sure that they are decimated and they do not continue to kill Nigerians.
All right. The peace committee is supposed to have former governors and all that. And I hope that peace will return and quickly return to Benue. That our heart goes out to many people who have lost their lives and their families, to written in pains, and some of them who are in hospital. Thank you so much, Bulama Bukati, my friend. Thanks so much, as always, for the insight you share tonight.
No, thank you. Thank you, Sheon, for having me.
Thank you.